Dancers Group is experimenting with new ways to unify, strengthen, and amplify voices in the Bay Area. We're excited to share a variety of ideas and stories. Olivia Ng is a San Francisco Bay Area multidisciplinary artist, performer, teacher, and choreographer. She graduated from UC Irvine studying Afro-modern dance with Donald McKayle, focusing on dance performance and sociology. She has combined her passion for dance, music, photography, herbal medicine, and holistic practices into works of art that have taken her around the globe. During a hiatus after a series of surgeries for a congenital spine defect, she began developing the SCARS Project, Strength, Courage, and Resilience of the Soul, with the mission to foster healing through dance, storytelling, poetry, cross-cultural exchange, and holistic practices. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to In Conversation. We're here with Olivia Ng. Hi.
Hi, Andrea. Thanks so much for inviting me to this.
Yes, we're so excited to have you here with us. Let's jump right in. Please tell our listeners, about your background and how you came to study with Donald McKayle.
Yeah, so as a young girl, I was always interested in the arts. Like I loved writing poetry and like drawing, and I don't exactly know when I decided I really wanted to train seriously in dancing. It was probably when I got a little bit older and into my teenage years. And so when it was getting ready to kind of decide where I wanted to go to school after high school, I was looking into a lot of different arts programs in different universities. And I think at that time, like I was trying to get out of the house. So at first I was like somewhere in the East Coast, far away, to kind of like find my own independence, because I was always like the baby of the family and kind of felt, babied in a lot of ways. So I was really wanting to like kind of branch out and physically go far, but I ended up choosing UC Irvine. I didn't really know a lot of dance history, to be honest, growing up, because I grew up in a really small town, and so there wasn't a lot of those resources available. And then as I started kind of researching on my own and deciding I wanted to take it more seriously, I did read and research a bit about Donald McKayle, because he seemed kind of like the main faculty at UC Irvine. And then just kind of reading on his history, I was like, oh, I definitely want to study with him, And so, but I missed the auditions to actually get in like the year that I was supposed to go in. So I actually spent a year first at UC Santa Barbara with the intention of transferring to UC Irvine after that year. And so I basically caught the audition for the second year and then went in as a sophomore to UC Irvine. But in terms of like my like dance, I guess, history before that, there was this teacher that moved to the States from Argentina. He was originally from Argentina. And I think when I started to train with him, he was the one that got me kind of thinking more seriously about pursuing it, as something that I wanted to do in my life. He had this like perfect balance of being really, a really like strict and disciplined teacher where, he really was like, no, you can't cut corners. You gotta like, do your warm up and your cool down. You gotta, and you gotta like do what you need to do, and he just had this way about him that kind of reminded me like of my own grandpa. From my mom's side, where he was also had this kind of like compassionate kind of energy that made you want to work with him and, really listen to everything that he had to share. I remember one thing that stuck with me that he said one time in class was, he was kind of going through like, okay, this is the routine that you need to do to like condition yourself. And you were really trained, because I came in with more of a sports background as a kid. So he's like, you got to learn how to like, use these muscles for dance. And, it's a little bit different, right? So he's trying to teach me, these things. And he was like, now you do it and you do it every day, but you don't tell anyone, you don't tell anyone, you don't need to tell anyone, you just do it because you know it's what you need to do. So in other words, like, it's not something that you have to like the hard work, basically, he emphasized, that you do behind kind of quote unquote closed doors is just something that you do because you know that it's the discipline that you need to instill in yourself, and it's not something that you need to like brag about or show people. And that really instilled in me that idea, like of just especially now, the day and age we're in now, where everything is like so accessible on Facebook and Instagram, and like, you do a live story or whatever, and you can literally capture every part of everything you're doing in every moment. I think that advice really instilled in me this sense of like discipline, just kind of like doing the things that need to be done to sustain yourself as an artist, as a dancer, whatever that is, for each person.
Yeah, so he was basically saying that discipline is your routine, and it's not for public show, it's for your personal growth and elevation.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's just like, just do it because you need to do it, but you don't need to tell everyone about it.
Absolutely. And that training has really worked for you, because I've seen some of your previous dance work and it's been outdoors in the elements. So what's that process like for you, and like what are some of your favorite places to move outdoors?
Yeah, I think I've done a handful of work with, working with other choreographers and groups, doing things in site specific places. The dance film that I facilitated last year that also was outdoors. But it's so interesting because I actually, when I did start like my dance training, it was always, in a studio, kind of like a more traditional studio with the mirror and like the floors and all of that. It wasn't really until I say maybe in university that I kind of experimented and kind of learned about doing more site specific type work. And even that was pretty minimal. It was still kind of a more traditional setting of like usually being in like a theater space or, in a studio that was made for dance. And so when I moved to the Bay is where I got really more introduced into that idea, of like, it's kind of like a thing, site specific work. And I think for me, in the different ways I've experienced it, it kind of just depends on the work. I remember once during many years ago when I worked with Paco Gomez, Afro-Brazilian choreographer from Bahia, I did a piece with him that was in Civic Center on top of that fountain. There's a fountain in Civic Center, kind of right in the middle of the plaza. They turned the fountain off basically, and we danced on top of the fountain. And that was part of Charlie dances. It was interesting because he had us, it was a piece that was like Afro-Brazilian contemporary modern fusion. And then the piece was already set, it was already something that we had done before. And then using kind of the space of the fountain really changed different elements of it, where he could kind of emphasize and highlight different sections of it more, or it kind of had a different meaning to it. And then I think for me personally, when I've done my own work, literally being by any kind of natural body of water, but then dancing by it, it feels also kind of, it gives me that same effect. It just feels very like serene and like it just gives a kind of comfort, that I don't get when I'm not by it. And then I've done other types of work and pieces also in like kind of like the redwoods or like the forest. I don't know if it's just like maybe the air or the energy. I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest, because you're not enclosed in like a space. So there's kind of like, it almost translates that into the movement of like feeling the freedom of like being able to extend your energy out beyond, any physical limits. That's the kind of feeling I get, I would say, when I'm dancing outdoors. That expansiveness and then also not being able to see yourself, but you have to just feel it. And because you have to, especially if there's like, you're in a kind of, let's say like a forest kind of floor, or ground, it's not super flat, and even like a dance studio. So it's like, you have to be really in tune and aware of like your movements, so you don't, step over like a branch or like fall into like a little pothole, And so I think there's something about being outdoors that also just like really tunes you in with your senses and like your inner awareness that expands outwards. And there's just something really beautiful about that.
We're going to take a quick break. Thank you for tuning in for this audio experience. To listen to previous In Conversations with our dynamic dance community, visit our In Dance article archive at dancersgroup.org. And we're back. Thank you so much for tuning in to In Conversation. We're here with Olivia Ng. So, Olivia, in our previous conversations, you mentioned volunteering at a farm. What? Tell us more about that experience and like what led you there.
Yeah, so it's an interesting journey. So my family is from Hong Kong and Kowloon, and but I was born here in the States. And growing up, I had a hard time with fitting in with the other kids because we were like maybe one of 3 Asian families in the small town that we grew up in. I experienced a lot of kind of like rejection of my culture in different ways. And so I think as a kind of protective mode, I kind of felt like this also like rejection, like self-rejection, and then rejection of different cultural practices. My mom always had so much wisdom to share with me as a kid growing up of like different herbal medicines and things like that she would give us. And, I would take it, because she was like, okay, take this, it's going to heal your sore throat or, help with this, this sickness or whatever. And even though I would take it, I always kind of had this attitude of like, I don't want to hear about this. This is because it was not wanting to like be part of the culture in that sense of like, okay, maybe, the kids will accept me more if I'm more like them or, And so as I started to heal those intergenerational wounds, as I got older, I started to voluntarily really wanted to learn more about basically all the things that my mother wanted to share with me when I was younger, but kind of rejected or kind of pushed away. I finally moved to a spot where there's kind of like a small space in the backyard to, plant things and have like a little garden space. And it's something that I was interested in for a long time of like learning how to, grow herbs and things like this as I was kind of getting more into wanting to learn about my ancestral medicine. And so I started to research more. I was kind of looking up different places to learn more about herbalism, but specifically I wanted to learn about like one type or like from one region, but wanted to find kind of like an all-encompassing program. So the UC Giltracts farm, and was kind of researching in there and saw that they had slots for volunteers, to basically kind of dig their hands in and, learn in person in that way. And so when I would go in and volunteer at first, I would volunteer on the days that just had to do with like learning about herbs. And that's like in every sense of like how to harvest them, how to cultivate them, how to take care of them. And so anything that had to do with herbs, I was just like really, really dove into. I try to keep going when I can and continue learning because I signed up for an herbal program, but it's not in person. So a lot of my in-person learning comes from, actually being at the farm and like digging my hands in and actually getting to practice a lot of the things that I'm studying.
That's such a wonderful opportunity and such a multidisciplinary way to learn more about yourself, to learn more about your culture, to learn more as an artist, because I'm seeing you bring like that holistic sensibility to your work as well. What's a quote or guiding point that has stayed with you over the years?
A great revolution in just one single individual will help achieve a change in the destiny of a society, and further will enable a change in the destiny of humankind. And that's a quote from Daisaku Ikeda, who is the current president of the Soka Gakkai International, which is a Buddhist practice, basically.
That is such a powerful statement.
It definitely resonates. I think during some of like the deepest struggles that I've had, this is one guidance that helped me to really, as hard as it was, to really try to shift from like this mindset of blaming others or like external factors or woe is me, which we can all get into like when we're going through it. Just this and other guidance that was similar to this kind of helped me to try to transform the attitude of like, if I want something to change, there's something that I have to change also within myself.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Right now, we're going to take another break. Thank you for tuning into this audio experience. To listen to previous In Conversations, please visit our In Dance article archive at dancersgroup.org. Welcome back with In Conversation with Olivia Ng. So Olivia, talk to us about the SCARS project. What is it and how did it manifest?
So SCARS is a multifaceted platform that brings people and community together through the intersection of artistic expression, dance, poetry, music, storytelling, and cross-cultural exchange. And then there's this element of holistic wellness and herbalism. The goal of it is to like kind of encompass the intersection of all those different things, or the kind of the mix of all those different things. And so SCARS is an acronym that I created that stands for strength, courage, and resilience of the soul. So SCARS was basically inspired and born from my own healing experience and journey that started in 2012 when I had a really traumatic surgery for a congenital defect in my spine, or issue in my spine that I needed to fix because it was starting to affect my ability to walk, let alone dance. I had this surgery and it didn't really go very smoothly, and my right leg ended up being paralyzed for almost a year because some of the nerves were so injured during the first surgery that I had back in 2012. As I was, going through that first recovery, I ran into a lot of different challenges. For the first year or so, I was just kind of trying to train that right leg to stand on its own and walk again. So I was going through a lot of challenges just with the not being able to dance anymore, and a lot of like physical pain. And then it brought up a lot of also like mental and emotional pain, that was, just part of that whole process. I remember I went to this one physical therapist this one time during my recovery for that first surgery. And she asked me, she said, do you want to have children one day? And I was like, yeah, of course, and I just, I didn't question it too much. It's like, okay, she's a physical therapist. I'm sure she's going to link this to something that makes sense. Let me just try to, trust this process. And so I kind of assumed that's why she was asking. It was like some kind of like health concern. And she was like, yeah, I'm asking because, I feel like, I haven't really worked with too many people your age that have had a surgery in that kind of place, part of your spine, which is kind of like, I guess it's kind of like a, it's in that was like the low back area. So it's kind of this place that,
connected to the pelvis.
Connected to the pelvis. And then, I think when you get pregnant and all that, it's kind of like it might put a lot of pressure, or just kind of like it's kind of focused in that area. And so I was like, okay, maybe that's why she's asking. And so she was explaining, so I think that, it's probably better if you want to have kids that you do it now, since you're like, you're still young, and I'm not sure how this whole thing is going to affect you, if you wait too long. And so, and it's interesting because I never really, it wasn't something that I really worried about. I was like, yeah, like when I'm ready, I'll have them, at that time that I was in, which was 29 at that time. And so I just, that whole interaction, she was like, she literally was like, if it's something that you want to do, then you need to like focus on finding a nice young man. And like, she was giving me all this like unsolicited advice. And here I was like literally just trying to like, let me just take care of this thing first. Let me just like heal this first. And then like, let me focus on like paying my bills off for that. threw me into this kind of like depression for a little bit, but then kind of just, as I think this has always kind of been something that I like, even as a kid, that I would do, is like kind of turn something into like art, whether it was like something painful or something, you know, joyful. It was always kind of like my way of like processing basically hard emotions. And so I had this idea, you know, like of, yeah, I'm totally going to have them. I'm not going to have them right now. It was almost kind of this thing of like, you know, a motivation for myself, you know, to reassure myself that I will have them one day, because it got me really worried. You know, she got me really worried that like, oh, maybe you're not going to be able to have them one day if you don't do it right now. And so I had this idea of coming up with this book, which would be a collection of like people's scar stories. And then because I started kind of dabbling a little bit in like being interested in like photography. And I feel like I got into that specifically with scars because I was just checking, I think maybe like the stitches or something one day on the scars that I had. You know, it took me a while to kind of like get used to looking at my body with the way that it had changed, because I also like, even directly after the surgery, I was really swollen. I actually looked pregnant, you know, because my abdomen was so swollen, and like, you know, some of the fluids hadn't drained out the way that they should have. And so everything was just kind of like, just, you know, I just looked like a different person when I woke up. And so it took me a while to like get used to seeing that when I would like undress and like get ready to go into like the shower and like see the little glimpses of, you know, the mirror and stuff. And so I think the photography part kind of came into mind because I would like make myself just stand there to like look at it until I got past like the discomfort of seeing my body that way. And it wasn't, maybe I didn't, the first day I wasn't like, oh, I love it, it's awesome, it's great, like, you know, let's show everyone this, you know. But I kind of did it as a practice to make myself like begin that process of like accepting, like, this is where you're at, this is what has happened. And you can't just be like, I mean, you can, but it's not gonna, you know, it didn't feel good to always go into that space where it's like I would look at it and then I would just feel disgusted. So I kind of, you know, I was like, what are you going to do about that? You have to like be able to look at it long enough. And it kind of just was a practice that I had to do every day until I was like, okay, now I'm used to seeing it, you know, it's not so bad. And so it was this process that I went through of like having to kind of train my mind in a way to, you know, accept it and like, but like in a genuine way. It wasn't like it happened the first day. It was a process, you know, through like many months and years. So that's where the idea that I got from that was then getting to a place where I was starting to actually, you know, feel a bit proud of what I went through, but as I was getting better, because when I would, you know, when you kind of look back, okay, oh, last year or like a few months ago, you know, and look how much you progressed, it was kind of like this thing that I started to feel like, yeah, you know, you're getting better, you know, you put in a lot of work to get here. I started to actually feel like kind of proud of it. And so as I started dialoguing with other people, felt like making those connections, we're healing for both, you know, for both people as we shared and exchanged our stories. And then I was kind of interested in getting into some photography since I couldn't dance. I was like, I just need some kind of like artistic outlet. Then the idea came of doing what I call like the kintsugi photography, which is painting. It began as painting around the physical scar with, at the time, it was just like gold makeup. You know, I didn't have any like fancy like gold paint or anything, but it was just gold makeup. And photographing the person with this, you know, kind of honor of their scar. And the inspiration, I think, for that kind of came from the practice of kintsugi, which is this ancient Japanese pottery repair technique where if something breaks, it's put back together and then it's lacquered. The crack is actually lacquered with gold, which symbolizes a lot of different things. But the main philosophy is that it's a celebration basically of the beauty of like what the broken object has now become because it has this history. So it's honoring that instead of seeing it as like less than or something that, you know, is done for, you know. Yes. And so that inspired me kind of to do the gold paint, you know, instead of just photographing the scar, but kind of like, you know, kind of embodying that philosophy and that way of seeing it, you know, as something that celebrated, honoring and the beauty in it actually, instead of something that should be hidden. When I started getting this idea, I was asking some friends, that had actually professional cameras. How would I like bring out the scar? Because everything that I looked up was how to hide scars. And so I think one of the goals in initiating the project when I first thought of it was like going back to the whole experience that I had with the physical therapist was I'm going to make this book and I'm going to show my kids that I have one day this book that I created, kind of in honor of them, to show them like the different scope of what beauty and strength and resilience, basically that's part of kind of where the acronym came from. Like these are all different representations of what strength, courage, and resilience, mean. And that was my motivation, was to be able to kind of like create more of the world that I would want, that I wish like maybe existed.
We're going to take a quick break. Thank you for tuning in for this audio experience. To listen to previous In Conversations with our dynamic dance community, visit our In Dance article archive at dancersgroup.org.
Yeah, I feel like, okay, that might have been something that helped me to kind of like stay motivated, is to read about other people's journeys and how they, found their own ways and healing ways. And maybe we can all exchange and, it kind of developed into kind of what it is now of like, wanting it to be a platform for these exchanges and like storytelling and like basically kind of holding each other up and encouraging each other and supporting each other, through our journeys.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, amazing. And what's the next project for Scars, or what's the next step that's coming up?
So as the platform has developed and I started to actually like dance and move again, it had this idea of creating these like kind of like a series, just a short dance films where, different groups of artists, like we come together with a different theme that's somehow related to scars. And if you've done one that's completed, which is the first one from last year, I reached out to some good friends of mine but they all lived in different countries. So there was one friend from Kenya. There was one from New York who was like on her way to move to Senegal. There was a friend from Senegal. There was one from Mexico. There was one couple that actually lived in the Bay, right? So we were like literally from all over, and we put together this global group of us where we did some Zoom meetings, and we did it in a way that kind of worked for each person in like their own location. And that was focused more on actual like physical scars, and then including some folks in the group that actually had some scars that weren't visible, but they wanted to share their story. And for their kintsugi, they would paint kind of like an iteration or like their representation of what their kintsugi would be on their body. So that was the first one of like the kind of like goal of having a series. And so we're currently working on the second one right now, and it's all artists that currently live in the Bay. The theme for that one is basically the acknowledgement, acceptance, and celebration of the different characteristics or traits or practices that are associated with our ethnicity or culture or identity or background in some way that we used to feel like we had to hide or feel ashamed of or felt conditioned to have to, reject in some way. Yeah, so each of us kind of have our own stories from our own backgrounds with that, so we have this kind of like highlight of each person's individual journey. And then as we've been rehearsing together and connecting and bonding together, we found some of these like kind of threads and thorough lines that, even though our stories and experiences may be different, there's also similarities in a lot of them that, tie us together.
Well, thank you so much, Olivia, for sharing your insight, your artistry, and your journey with us.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for giving me a chance to share all of it with you.
Yeah, and let the people know where they can find you and follow your work.
So the website for Scars is www.scarsart.wixsite, so WIXSITE, and then /scars at the end of that. So that's the website. And then on Instagram, it's at scars.art.heals. And then on Facebook, it's just all one word, Scars Art. And same thing with the YouTube channel. So those same Scars Art, all one word.
Thank you so much for this journey, for this time. We hope you all will tune back in for the next In Conversation. Thanks so much for joining us for this audio experience. For additional content that reflects our dynamic dance community, visit our In Dance article archive at dancersgroup.org.